What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited today because we're finally going to take the car out again, for realsies this time. If you read the title, you know what we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss camber arms. I have a fair amount of experience with these, and I want to tell you guys about my experience. So make sure to finish the end of this video before you go ahead and buy a set of camber arms so you can determine which ones are right for you. But in the last video, I had mentioned that something happened like at the end of the video, and today we're going to fix that. Our mystery, oh, that might have given it away. We have this guy. So we're gonna go ahead and take care of that necessary maintenance before we hop on the road. Looking at both these fuel pumps out of the car, I'm not totally sure that this one was original. It does look older than this one, but they look identical, and they both on the top have the same stickers and part numbers and everything. No BMW label. So we'll see if this fixes it. If this doesn't fix it, I have another idea, but that will be for another video. Now on the road, let's discuss some camber arms. So there are a few types of camber arms that we're going to discuss today. The first kind is going to be the rubber ball joint style. So to kind of start off with the differences between what we're going to talk about, the difference is going to be in the bushing style of the upper ball joints, the ones that connect to the subframe. Those are the ones that tend to vary between various E36 camber arms. So with rubber ball joints are what stock has. The NVH is very like stock with rubber ball joints. So you might be asking, what would be the purpose of upgrading a camber arm if you were just going to keep rubber ball joints anyway? Really, you would do it for adjustability. So the stock camber arms can get up to -2 degrees of adjustment on your rear wheels on E36 and E46 BMWs. If you want more than that, you have to buy aftermarket camber arms. And technically, the -2 degrees is not a correct solution because you have to shim the bolt, and it's not ideal, it's not perfect, you just can. So, really the solution is to buy camber arms. There's a few different kinds of camber arms you can buy. Right now, I'm running the Turner Motorsport Street camber arms, which is essentially just a stock camber arm, made a little bit better, in my opinion, looks really cool, and offers more adjustability than the stock ones. What's nice about the rubber style ball joints is the NVH. The other style of bushings that we'll talk about tend to be a lot more noisy, and rubber, in my opinion, is really nice for street cars with uneven pavement and things you would normally have to put up with while just driving a car on the road. Another advantage of rubber ball joints is you don't have to service them. You just throw them on, and the rubber ball joints they're good. They work, they do their job, that's all there is to them. So some disadvantages of rubber ball joints are that, well, first, they're rubber, so they don't offer the same level of adjustment and fine-tunability that you get with another style of joint, which is a big pitfall for a track car because they introduce unwanted deflection and a main source of your suspension travel, which is generally no bueno. They also crack with age, and they tend to not last as long as the other style of joints. Generally, most rubber ball joints are, I would say, in best operating condition for 5 or 6 years, which, if I had to guess, is probably when BMW recommends you replace them, maybe even like 7 or 8 years, 70, 80,000 miles. I'm not totally sure on the service interval for your ball joints, but that is what I would guess it is. They can usually last a lot longer than that, but they will start to not perform as well, which is one of the really biggest disadvantages of rubber, and one of the biggest reasons why people with street cars will think to change it out, not really thinking of the potential negative side effects. With that, we're going to talk about the next style of joint, which is a Heim joint. So I had a pair of Turner arms that had Heim joints in them, and honestly, I loved them when I got them on. They were great. They handled fantastic. The car in the corners was extremely predictable, and it just made the car a lot more fun to drive. The problem with Heim joints on a street car is that they aren't as, say, durable as a rubber joint. So what do I mean by that? They aren't as good at taking a beating as, say, something like a rubber bushing wheel from a pothole or bumps in the road, things like that, because Heim joints can go farther, they can travel further, which sometimes in a track setting is what you want, but when you're in a street setting, you hit a big pothole, that thing can go way too far and then break. This is what we think happened to my set of Turner arms, because they failed, I say failed, had play in them after only a year, which is not long enough at all for a control arm. They should, even when I called Turner, they were surprised by the lack of longevity I had out of those camber arms. And I would honestly attest it to just Michigan roads. Michigan roads don't really support that type of thing. Another disadvantage of Heim joints is the Heim joints require servicing. So what do I mean by that? Well, you have to grease them every so often. I didn't know this. I also didn't do that. So that's another potential reason that they could have maybe failed. But it's just something to kind of keep in mind with Heim joints. Of course, the advantages of Heim joints are that you do get a lot more fine-tunability in your suspension, and they do allow for you to get a more correct alignment and maintain your alignment, more importantly, while you're in turns and doing track driving. You have slicks, maintaining high Gs. You need your bushings to not be deflecting and moving which ways, because all it takes is one wrong jerk, the bushing deflects in a certain way, and then you lose traction, or you start to get understeer, oversteer, and it'll hurt your lap times, and it makes the driving experience not as good. I will say my Heim joints, when I had them on, I liked them a lot, especially when I had them on the track. They felt at home. Granted, it is a little hard for me to tell because I also replaced the entire rear suspension, so I don't have that direct comparison necessarily, but I do think that the Heim joints offered a more crisp feel. When I switched to the rubber style, so I have the same Turner arms, but now the rubber style bushing instead of the Heim, which is what I'd put on initially when I did my rear suspension, I noticed immediately the ride quality was a lot better than with the Heim joints. And honestly, as far as predictability goes, in most street settings, I actually found the rubber to be more predictable than the Heim joints. Because with the Heim joints, I noticed I'd get a little bit of wheel skipping, or like it almost felt like if you had your shocks too soft and they traveled too much over various bumps. After I swapped to the rubber, when I'm taking corners over bumps, the Heim joints, the rubber joints handle it a lot better than the Heim joints did, which is something I was not really expecting. I kind of only expected it to be worse, but the ride quality to be better. So actually, I think for a street car, rubber makes the most sense in that position, especially with bad roads, because your car will actually handle better on uneven pavement than with Heim joints. Go for another little one too. Whew. Gotta clear the rust off those rotors after it's been sitting for a while. That's just my experience with rubber and Heim joints. I do think that Heim joints have a time and a place, especially if you live somewhere with nice roads, you want to drive it to and from the track. Heim joints are not that bad to live with, NVH-wise. So from that standpoint, I would not mind doing them again. Now onto our third style of joint there, and that would be monoballs. Monoballs are the most expensive, and that's generally their biggest drawback. But monoballs tend to offer the best both worlds. The NVH is, and I will say I'm not talking from experience on this one because I haven't felt monoballs in the camber arms personally. So I'm going off of mostly the internet, but monoballs are supposed to offer you the same level of alignment, adjustability, and your retention of your alignment and turns, your articulation, while getting rid of the pitfalls of rubber. So how do they do this? Well, Monoball is essentially a solid bushing, except on the inside it has a bearing. And this bearing is what gives you your travel. Hi, Future Sunny here to interrupt real quick. So pretend that this is your E36 rear suspension. You have the subframe here, this is where your diff would sit, everything else, this is your wheel, right? And here is your camber arm. So this is the outer ball joint, the wheel side. This is always going to remain rubber. On this side, we have our upper ball joint, or inner, whatever you want to call it. This is the one that would change between Heim, rubber, or Monoball. In a setting with a stock rubber joint, there's a bearing inside that ball joint that spins, but it also has a rubber casing. The rubber casing can move up and down, left and right, diagonally. It deflects inside its housing. When you do Monoball, it is the same design, except instead of having a rubber casing that can deflect, it is a solid casing, moving your suspension travel to a single bearing that is going to pivot this arm, and the movement will be controlled by just the bearing and not the rubber deflecting. Similar scenario with the Heim joint, just a different way of achieving this result. When you look at it that way, the Monoball kind of is the correct option if you're looking at it from an engineering standpoint, but I don't think that monoballs are really necessary for most people because the price hike is pretty substantial when it comes to those sorts of things. One other drawback of the monoballs is you also do have to grease them, unlike rubber, which are zero maintenance. So that is something to consider. That said, Turner does say that you can run their monoballs on the street, even in harsh environments. So it really is up to you as to whether you want to stay on top of the greasing or not. I could be wrong on how often you have to do it and how much work it really is. It could be nominal. I don't have experience with it, but especially comparing from rubber ball joints to Heim joints, I would do rubber again on any car that sees mostly road use, or even 50-50, because I think the difference for a lot of people is not going to be as significant as they're hoping as far as the performance of the Heim joint as opposed to the rubber. There you have it. That is my take on camber arm designs or camber arm bushings on E36, E46, all the other BMWs that share the same rear suspension. I don't freaking know, do your research. But with that said, I'm gonna end the video here. I hope you all enjoyed. Like and subscribe. I always forget to say that. And hit the notification bell.